I have a question for you. It's simple and fundamental. Are humans animals? If they are, what separates us from them? And ultimately, if they aren't, what makes us any better? What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, Inhuman Mchio. Have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Here's another fun fact. I'm sorry. I'm still stupid. I took a 5-second break between recording the live reaction and the review. I almost want to skip straight to the end. I don't care about the rest of this chapter. No, whatever. Okay, I do care about the rest of it because this chapter is context. I've been saying a certain thing about JJK Modulo, and it's the idea that Gege in original JJK had underlying and subtle themes along with the major ones. It was we're gonna interweave these in and make it work here and there, and if people don't get it, that's okay, because there's gonna be the major themes you're gonna be able to easily latch on to, and then there are gonna be minor ones that's gonna be fine and cool and smooth and clean and buttery. But clearly JJK was very controversially received. There are many people who did understand the themes, many people who didn't. Many people said it didn't have any themes at all, or that the themes were buns, or they didn't make sense in this, that, and the third. Or if they were there, they were so unclear that they couldn't even be intended at all. I think Gege heard all those critiques, let them stew in their belly for about a year, and said, fine, if these people don't like subtext, if these people don't like subtlety, if these people don't want any of that, I will simply grab the nearest heavy object that has the words themes written on it and beat them over the head with it. And as a person who at least believes I somewhat, maybe, possibly, sort of, maybe, in a way, kind of grasp some of the themes of JJK, probably not all of them, because there are a lot of themes in JJK, I was not ready to have Gege take the nearest heavy object, put it up to themselves, write themes all over it, and proceed to, and just constantly straight on the dome. But, let's just say Gege Akutami decided, fine, subtlety is for weaklings and fools who haven't played Deltarune and or Undertale or watched a Let's Play of it, and thusly, we're going to hit them with themes.txt so hard that they will start questioning the viable nature of humanity. Hi, I've been hit with a book. Let me hit you with one too. So let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. By the way, the live reaction is 30 minutes. It's 32. I had to stop myself. I was gonna start looping the boy out, but you want to check that out over at Patreon, fellas? What about? You can remember for $13 a month. Live reaction. This chapter. Of the previous chapter. Well, this chapter is a lot, but that be the case. Let's hop right into. Oh, now the chapter makes so much more sense too. Oh, the chapter title I made. Oh, Gege, you're actually burning the entire kitchen down, bro. Please, please, please. But let's hop right into chapter 12 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, which is known as Inhuman Mchio. And, Inhuman Mchio indeed. As we see a conversation that's being set up between Cross and Jabaloma. Presumably the word of... I have completely forgotten this character's name. I'm going to go back. I know Osuki's name. I completely forget the name of the character who brought us to this. Elder Boro. Alright. Elder Boro clearly reported to Osuki, and then Osuki clearly reported to Cross and Jabaloma. Because naturally, Osuki is if anything, I feel like Osuki is definitely meant to represent the common feeling of the Rumelian people in a way. While Jabaloma, Cross, Maro, they're the exceptions. in a unique way. In terms of the Rumelian people. So, they were the ones who are also the liaisons between humanity and the Rumelians. And thusly, they're the ones who bring up the idea that there are Kalions falling. And we see that naturally Usami hears the claim that they're killing Kalions and is we're killing Kalions? Which obviously just sounds absurd because they're on an entirely different planet and Kalions have never and will not, have never and will not exist on Earth. Now, this whole chapter raises a question that I'll bring up now, just in case I forget to bring it up later. But, did they bring the 2,000-year-old one with them, or was that left behind? In the Naunax somewhere, is the Kalion? The Kalion. Well, no, I'll literally bring it up later. But note, there are no Kalions on Earth. There don't seem to have ever been Kalions on Earth. But Kalions are very important. And one is literally necessary to their entire culture. So I do wonder, did they bring that one with them? Because I don't know how else they would even think that Kalions would end up on Earth. And we see that Cross explains, yes, some of our people are insisting that it's true. And naturally, Usami's like, not to call your people liars or anything, but there must be some kind of mistake. Kalions don't exist on Earth, nor do any similar creatures. Now, the any similar creatures things is interesting, but notably, with the idea that the information embargo, right, only just started to fade, I completely understand why Usami didn't make the logical leap I made at the end of last chapter. Because we were both operating a bit in the dark. And notably, just the way that Kalions have been described so far, the only reason that I even picked on them possibly just being cursed spirits or more solid cursed spirits is because of the images we actually got of them. I highly doubt when Cross was explaining their reverence for Kalions, stuff like that, or Jabaluma was explaining their reverence for Kalions, I doubt they like pulled up pictures were like, this is what a Kalion looks like. And then Usami would have saw that and been like, oh, that's a like there was no visual indication, right? And while their immortality definitely would have been like a weird thing, this was an entirely alien species, right? Sure, the Rumelians look a lot like humans, but convergent evolution is a thing. Kalions could have just been a different type of creature. Heck, there are some creatures in our world that are, for all intents and purposes, pretty much immortal. There's like the immortal jellyfish, which can kind of just like regen back to its baby state and then just grow up again, though it's very tiny and very conditional and very unlikely to ever be applied to humans because we are much more infinitely complex, multicellular, like, how many cells are in the human body? It's like, it's trillion, right? Hold on. Let me double check. Please. How many cells are in the human body? 30 trillion. 30 trillion. However, this number varies between 20 and 100 trillion depending on factors such as age, height, weight, all that. Okay, so yeah. So 30 trillion is the average. We are now, like, I've seen people being like, we can use the immortal jellyfish to figure out how to do that for ourselves. We are not. We are infinitely more complex creatures. Like, we probably have more complexity. So, like, let me see. How many cells are in the immortal jellyfish? Theoretically, it's processing on definitely immortal jellyfish secret to treating. Okay, I don't know, but they're very small creatures. I'm pretty sure, and they're not that complicated. And there's another immortal creature on our planet. It's called a lobster. You want to know the issue with a lobster? Just because they can live forever doesn't mean they can molt forever. They just cannot maintain the energy cycle required to molt. Hypothetically, if you were to take care of a lobster permanently and help it molt over and over and over again, technically it would live forever. But like, considering we haven't done that yet, I think it's just way too difficult of a process. And like, it's like immortality in a pseudo-functional sense, but not like an actual literal sense. Like it's not a thing. So maybe Usami just assumed all that and didn't like make the connection. Because also, cursed spirits are more so implied to be immortal. There is no record, and now correct me if I'm wrong, there's no record of any cursed spirit even living like multiple years. Because usually they get exorcised. Remember, Suguna was not a cursed spirit. He was a guy, and he was even a guy that didn't really live that long. Suguna didn't live for 1,000 years, he was fingers for 1,000 years. Same, and once again, human guy. Kenjaku couldn't even live technically immortally. He had to leap body from body to body to body, because his body's kept aging, presumably. So, he wasn't immortal. The only reason Choso and his siblings were, I put siblings in quotation for some reason. The only reason Choso and his siblings were immortal, quote unquote, is because they were never like actually completed. They weren't born. They were like in stasis tubes as wombs, right? Like they didn't really age or anything like that. So there is no concept for a truly immortal creature on Earth, whether it be even in this like super advanced Jujutsu magic universe. So I get why it didn't click. But naturally, we see that all it takes is one little bit in order for it to all click. As Jabaloma says, yes, what we have confirmed here is coming from the witness's third eye. He says he saw Kalions being slain somewhere in Tokyo. And Mito naturally hears, Tokyo? And Usami goes, oh, we're fried! Because that naturally leads to a clean correlation. Because there's no humans in Tokyo. There's only one thing in Tokyo. And what would sorcerers be doing in Tokyo? Slaughtering what would appear to be Kalions. And this is interesting, right? Because it definitely raises the question of why was Elder Buro in Tokyo? We don't know where exactly the cultural exchange took place. Like, we just don't really have a clue where it took place. But, like, he must have traveled a bit, right? Like, Elder Buro likely just covered up his third eye and left because it didn't seem like he was at the cultural exchange. We didn't see him last chapter. He only comes back and reports to the ship on the Naunox that, hey, we've been fried because they're slaughtering Kalion. Like, getting even into Tokyo would require Eldoboro to either be standing right on the edge where the fence is or have somehow snuck in. And we do see a whole bunch of Sumerians sneak in, so it is very interesting that they went through all that. Essentially, looking for a reason. But at the same time, I do understand why they want to get off the ship, because they've been locked on that ship for who knows how long. Not like multiple years, I don't even think it's been half a decade they were on that ship, but I do think it's been long enough that they're actively concerned and want to get off, but it leads to conflicts like this. And naturally, we cut away, because we can't have all the tension happen at once. In fact, we do need both sides of the story here. I joked earlier about saying I don't want to cover the rest of the chapter, because the rest of the chapter is important, as we get lore and context for the current state of the world, and why I didn't question the current state of the world earlier was just me accepting new narrative, new rules, but I should have questioned it more. As we see Tsurugi explain, or Tsurugi and Yuka explain, cursed spirits only manifest in Tokyo. And Maru's naturally like, huh? And she explains, when the government had to publicize the existence of cursed spirits because of the culling game, they lied and said they only appear in Tokyo. Which is interesting. And clearly, I fell for the government propaganda in that case. I was like, oh, I guess that's the case. I didn't even ask any questions. As Tsurugi explains, we help limit the leakage of cursed energy to Tokyo, an area the public have no access to. So that lie effectively became the truth. So, effectively, but cursed spirits can still spawn outside of Tokyo. Heck, remember, Miguel's clan still exists. Whether or not there are multiple places in Africa or just wherever Miguel is from, I don't think we ever get do we ever get a country from Miguel? I think there are people who speculate about this kind. I don't think we ever actually got a country for Miguel, where in Africa he came from. But Miguel's family exists. They're sorcerers. Presumably, they existed and needed the black rope technique to either fight other sorcerers or to fight cursed spirits. So curses likely still do exist beyond Tokyo and even beyond Japan itself. But due to cursed spirits kind of functioning like Chainsaw Man D's, they still do rely on like their belief, and they form and formulate and function as fears based on humanity. So if a large collective of humanity, especially the collective of humanity who even creates them or allows them to exist, believes that, oh, they only exist in this one area, they will begin to manifest and exist in that one area. I do wonder though why a certain someone isn't there more consistently. We don't see him at all this chapter, but I do wonder why Yuji would let things go on like that. Or not even let them go on like that, but why would he let such a large collective build up over time? It is an interesting. We'll see it later, and I'll point out why Yuji probably should have done something about it beforehand. Once again, we just don't have enough context for where or what Yuji is or what he's doing. So there's that. But we see that Yuki explains, still, that doesn't mean that curses never manifest outside of Tokyo. That's why she opens up a ball, or a door with a ball on it, and places another talisman. I was wondering for a little bit whether or not we had seen this area before, but notably, I don't think we have. The one area I'm thinking of is Sukuna's finger. That last Sukuna's finger that didn't really even have Sukuna's soul in it, just like a husk that was left over. That was the one that was struck by Nambara, essentially. That was put away at the end of JJK. So I do wonder if that technically acts as a ward or a talisman or anything like that anymore, because it shouldn't have Sukuna in it. But with it being the case, we see that Yuka explains, we have to keep up the warding barriers, even in Kyoto. And this ball is the warding barrier, essentially preventing cursed spirits from manifesting. At least it should do that. But we see that Tsurugi says, and it just, yeah, it's a universal enemy thing. I don't know why. Sometimes Bankers just don't draw noses. Tsurugi's missing his nose here. So is Yuka in this page. Maru's missing his, so many characters missing his nose. Why is it so common for noses missing here? I just wasn't paying attention to it. I want to go back and smack every version of me that was critiquing Sakamoto's characters for having no noses. No, this is just an anime thing that I've just never noticed. Never nosed this. Don't worry, I hit myself for you. But with it being the case, no, why. It keeps catching my attention. Now that I've seen it and noticed it, I can't unsee it whenever a character does not have a nose. But I think it just since it's a center point, it's weird. It's like removing, I'll do an example. It's like just removing the middle of a painting. Like imagine Captain America's, I'm looking at it because I have Captain America's shield on the wall. So in fact, I might as well, such a minor point though, it's for noses. But yeah, in fact, I won't even take it down. But essentially, imagine the big star in the middle of Captain America's shield. Imagine if that just wasn't there. It was just like a hole. Wouldn't that feel weird? That's how I feel about a nose missing. Like imagine me without my nose. I didn't even bring any, like it's just gone. Like, I put myself in the eye. I put myself in the eye. But, back here. But imagine I just crowing myself, dog. Cut my nose off to spite my face, I guess. Wouldn't it look weird because there's just nothing there? Yeah, that's how I feel about there being no anime noses. But I need more agua. But we see that Tsurugi admits, And it just so happens it's time for the Great Purification Ritual too, which is admittedly a bit convenient. I do hope we get a reason for why it's now. Like, I'm not sure if we do have like loose time or assumptions when this story is taking place, like in the year, but I wonder why the Great Purification Ritual is coming around now. You would think, right? Well, I'll save it a little bit, but I've kind of already mentioned Kenjaku and his pseudo-immortality, but I do think Kenjaku's meddling does definitely have a reason for why curse energy is so concentrated in the Shinjuku area, and also it's also Sukuna's fault, because Sukuna, but, and it also technically would be, like, based on, like, Bleach stuff, funnily enough, in a way, could also kind of be Gojo's fault, just because of where he perished, but, with it being the case, there's a whole bunch of things, and I wonder if it was the Inhuman Mchio showdown, which took place on December 24th, that led to this being the time for a Great Purification Ritual, because every year they do it then. But I don't think we've seen snow. I'm not sure if it snows in Japan. But I just don't know what the time period of the year is, essentially. I do wonder why the Great Purification Ritual is now, other than, plot convenience leading to conflict. But at the same time, you gotta have some sort of conflict in your story. And we see that Maru naturally had never heard of this, being like, the what? And Yuka says, an exorcism that we do at fixed times to make sure cursed spirits don't spill out of Tokyo. The barriers are more easily disturbed during this time. So that is interesting. The barriers, Wayne? But I just don't know. Like, they say this time. What time of year is it? Does it have anything to do with the showdown? Because the reason... Okay, let me just go into it right now. The reason I'm thinking it may have to do with the showdown itself is because, one, a lot of the barriers were actually already complete. Like, they had reached their capacity of cursed energy, so Kenjaku was ready to use some of them. But wasn't ready to use all of them, because all the sorcerers needed to perish for the case of the Culling Games to end in order to create the merger. But speaking of the merger, all those ones that had already been fully synced, those were still just evolved Tengen barriers, or based on Tengen's initial barrier. And we know the merger was Tengen. So I'm assuming all that energy that sort of collected there, top that off with the energy of Ryoben Sukuna's death itself, top that off with Gojo's death, top that off with the sheer just level of insanity that was being thrown around in Tokyo. I'm assuming all that energy coalesced and created this like nexus point of negativity, which probably is haunting everybody to this day. It is nice to see the progress though, in comparison to what Jujutsu Kaisen used to be like, because Tsurugi points out students don't ever really get called to do the ritual though, which is interesting, right? Why are students not called to do the ritual? Because students aren't meant to be full-fledged sorcerers, not on their own. They're still being more protected than they were prior. You remember original JJK? You could be a first year or a third year or anywhere in between. They were throwing you at anything and everything they could. It didn't matter. So there is still progress made between the JJK we know and the JJK that's come to be. And we see that they are even eating and drinking and having a good old time as they go simply reapply wards to all these curses. And presumably all of these are previous wards that were put up and they're just going through and doing this. And we see that ultimately Maru's like, these cursed spirit things, are they really that strong? And Yuki says, they're all over the place. Maybe because there were a lot more irregular ones than curses. Or no, curse users. And that is the most interesting thing, right? Ultimately, they probably have never encountered a special grade curse. And over the 70-year period, at least of stuff that was recorded, there has been not another Jogo. There hasn't been another Hanami. There hasn't been another Dagon. I forget how long Jogo said it would be before they incarnated again, but it's interesting that ultimately none of those have spawned again. Whenever there has been spawned, has likely been taken care of by somebody. Presumably Yuta and Maki while they were still alive, and presumably Yuji now. Because I feel like it is oddly coincidental that there just haven't been any special grades. Or at least, that's what seems to be implied here by they're all over the place. We know there is a wide range of cursed spirits, from all the way to grade 4, all the way up to special grade. But it is interesting that there are a lot more regular ones than cursed users, which implies that cursed users are like certainly on a more consistent standard of power. Takada wasn't an exception because he was a grade 1, or maybe he was an exception because he was a grade 1 level sorcerer. I don't know, it is a little bit strange, but we see as they squeeze and drink, ultimately we see that Yuki explains, oh, and since there's so many of those swarming around, the former capital is called Tokyo, the Inhuman Mchio. And we see the realm of not even the realm, just Tokyo itself, after being turned into essentially a cursed spirit. Not like hive. Funnily enough, the word that comes to mind is hive, because of the insects we see here and then later on. But essentially that's kind of what it's become. It's become a nest for cursed spirits to exist of all types, shapes, sizes, and forms. And coexist seemingly is the word, right? There are still buildings, even after 70 or 68, but 70 years of them just being here. they aren't really fighting each other, if you'll note. You see that the cursed spirits are, if anything, coexisting with each other, or not really going into conflict of sort. And that is interesting to see, especially considering their size, right? Because I'm trying to think of original JJK. We definitely did have some large-scale curses, but none of them were like this big for like, look at that bull curse in particular. Look at this thing, old boy, right? No one's ever been this beefy. Even Rika. Well, no. To be fair, Rika was because Rika was that beefy when she was still a vengeful curse, because she became big enough to consume an entire building or break out of a being that was essentially breaking out of an entire building all the way back in Zero. So we just haven't seen curses of this scale in a long time. The main narrative, even the most powerful curses, were relatively tiny. Even Rika, when she's weird curse Shikigami type thing, is much smaller and never seems to reach her original massive building level size. And Jogo, small. Hanami, small. And by small, I mean like human size, so just in the realm of humanity. But all of them were humanoid. Even Dagon, once he fully transformed, well, he was large. He wasn't like building large. And even once he fully manifested and was no longer a baby, he was still not insanely big. So it is crazy to see that 70 years of development and evolution have led to cursed spirits of this size. The most interesting one to me isn't even this clear spider analog with the human arms coming out of its side, the multiple eyes all over its face, and the different skulls that are growing out of its back, something made of some sort of grass and or moss and or fog. It's not the many weird sacs that are hanging around here, which presumably are eggs. We don't know how cursed spirits reproduce, but like, it is weird that they would be here. Once again, there are no humans to hunt here, so at least not seemingly. And then there's this massive bull one, which is interesting. It doesn't seem to have eyes of any sort, but it is a massive bull-like creature. It's this thing. This is this is a specific rip to horrify me in particular. Why is there a flying whale with frog legs? And like, not even bat wings. Like, very specifically, it's like the fins of the whale turned into like the wings of a bird. But it's almost like insect. This is horrifying. Fun fact, Young Pencil, and I do mean Young Pencil, was horrified of blue whales. Very silly blue whales. I don't know. For some reason, the rest of the whales didn't scare me. But blue whales, particularly, I think it's because of their sheer size and scale. That, for all intents and purposes, is a flying whale of some type. I'm not sure if it's a blue whale. It reminds me of a blue whale. I think the front is a little bit too wide for it to be a blue whale. Or, oh, no, the front of this is a little too narrow for it to be a blue whale. But, still, this is the most interesting design to me, especially they do like these designs. And this is clear that usually Saka-sensei said, oh, you think I can't draw freaky? Oh, we can get freaky. And they got freaky with this panel alone. However, we see the Great Purification ritual going on, and how, not necessarily, what's the word I'm looking for? Not commercialized. What's the word I'm looking for when describing the Great Purification ritual? It's a lot more mechanical than one would think, and a lot more personal. When you hear Great Purification ritual, you would think it's like, oh, maybe they're super reinforcing a barrier, maybe they're coming together and like pouring their cursed energy into a singular object that acts as the source of the barrier. No, the Great Purification ritual, I don't know why I'm struggling to say that word, but the Great Purification ritual is them walking into the Inhuman Mchio, upping Blick, and boom! Launching off. Of course, it's very particular, this guy who's upping Blick and releasing, presumably, shots of his own cursed energy, if I had to hazard a guess. Because he's the only one who's ascribed this type of weapon in particular, as we see his comrade very specifically wielding a regular blade. And I do want to double check something. And I will, in fact, I'm going to double check something literally as I talk about it. But, with that being the case, we see that the smaller curses, at least, are being taken down by these sorcerers. We've seen this guy before, and I forget if we've seen the other individual before. They may be the one that brought up the Hikari exception. If I'm thinking about it, I may be wrong on that. But essentially, they're going through and manually lowering the population of cursed spirits in the Inhuman Mchio. Notably, though, we don't know if they're actually in close proximity to any of these larger curses, which are presumably like grade 2s or grade 1s. Once again, they are massive. I highly doubt these sources will be capable of taking down the larger ones. They're very specifically taking down these smaller ones, these insect-like ones that presumably are manifestations of fears of insects. And we see that the guy says, got it, 10 points. And he steps on the body as it crunches. Or I'm not sure if he steps on the body or if it just falls and crunches into the ground. And his ally says, hey, isn't it 5? It's not much different from the one I took down earlier. And that's what I mean by saying it's so automated and impersonal and not ritual-esque in the way you would initially hear the word ritual. Because they're essentially treating it like a game. It's not even, the serious, okay, we must lock in and make sure we take this operation seriously. It's more like, eh, we do what we do, how we do it, when we do it. But I'm very particularly going to look for, okay, no, it should be around chapter. So I want to see if we know this guy's name. Nope, that's the Yuka chapter. This is the flashback. Where is the chapter I'm thinking of? Where is it? It's them coming to Earth. This guy. Yeah, it is the exact same guy. But I wonder if this guy has a name. This guy not having a name is going to come back to haunt us later. In terms of like one little writing thing I may or may not have an issue with depending on how I interpret it. Talk about the themes, that text that we went over earlier. But very particularly, let me scan this. Let me look for name. Do you have a name, guy? Do you have a name? I don't see a name from you, buddy. Marriage should be categorized as threats. Game lost all meaning. Yeah, okay, that is a different person than the one who brought up the Akari province or principle. Let me look. Yeah, this guy didn't seem. I'm telling you, this is ridiculous. Wheel of Cursed Energy and all Sumerians. Where you out of your way to side against them. Then demonstrate we need to find Yuji Todori, and then this never ends. Apologize for him to be later. Don't drag it. Yep. All right, so. We don't know this guy's name. At least I don't think we do. I'm not going to look too deep. If we do know this guy's name, delete / slightly alter the critique I'm going to have later. But this is the idea, right? They're going in, they're manually taking it down. It's a population control thing rather than a great grand ritual. It doesn't seem to even be that, like, holy in the slightest. It's not like a traditional thing. It's like a slaughter as many as you can. They make a game out of it and everything. And we see the guy say, size isn't all that matters. It's not about the size of the boat, dude. It's about the motion in the ocean. Of course, the other guy's like, how else was it different then? And as the cursed spirit just fades out of existence, the guy's like, shut up, respect your elders. Which is hilarious. Seeing what this guy goes on to do. As we see, he says, come on, let's go into this building next. And naturally, the sword wielder with him is like, why? Are you scared? And the guy says, shut up. Just the rules. We gotta have 2 or more people for exorcisms indoors. And this is interesting, right? Notably, well, I think it's mainly because, if I'm thinking about it, after Shibuya, we don't really fight that many cursed spirits in original JJK. Like, cursed spirits just become an accessory. Or not, well, why did I say it like that? They become an accessory, or like a piece of somebody's kit, kind of, sort of. The last cursed spirit that ever is like a major focal point antagonist is Mahito. And Mahito's dealt with it within the first 150 chapters. I mean, like, Naoya. I guess Naoya, he becomes a cursed spirit. So, like, technically, that's another cursed spirit major antagonist, at least for one section of one overarching arc. But even then, like, exercising you. The reason this is brought up is because they're talking about it as exorcisms, right? Just shut up. It's the rules. Gotta have 2 more people for exorcisms indoors. They're talking about destroying cursed spirits as exorcisms. When it realistically, especially to the eyes of the visiting Romelians, is kind of just slaughter, right? Like, exorcism gives us this higher grand feel, once again, just like the idea of it being called the Great Purification Ritual. It sounds a lot nicer than it is. Essentially just slaughtering beasts, though of course there's a reason why they slaughter the beasts. I'm presuming it's to avoid a super collection of cursed energy, right? Because we don't know where all that power went. We know Sukuna's body is acting as the new Tengen, essentially, to maintain all the barriers throughout all of Japan and amplify them to any point. But all that energy that was stored up during the Culling Games probably didn't just vanish. I highly doubt it did. And all the cursed energy that was stored in Sukuna and Gojo and Tengen likely didn't just vanish. And they all died in the same spot within, at most, a kilometer or 2 of each other. Really? And I'm not even saying that, like, admittedly, what that idea of, like, the deaths of these extremely powerful and important sorcerers meaning something is I'm thinking of the Bleach thing. If you didn't know, in Bleach, when certain powerful characters perish, they are literally so strong the universe can't process them properly. I'd say Gojo and Sukuna and Tengen, all exceptional, extremely powerful characters, all fit that criterion on top of the Culling game. They all perished in the same spot. All that cursed energy was pushed and forced into one area, released all into one area. So I'm not exactly shocked that all these cursed spirits are here, no humans are allowed to be in here, and also that the conglomeration will be so much that they couldn't really do anything about it. But at the same time, this is meant to be a manifestation of his passive cursed energy, so it's really hard to tell. And we see And ultimately, there are a bunch of cursed spirits, like what look like corn-esque bats. I don't know. I think it's because like the wing texture. They don't really look like regular bats. They look like corn. And we see the guy, the nameless man, who will do something. But he says, "The heck? They're low grade, but there's a ton of them." Screech! And we see that a whole bunch of them. I'm assuming these hands aren't meant to be literal. But there are a whole bunch of hands seemingly guiding up the stairs to this certain individual door. And naturally, the guy's like, are they being drawn here? Is there something else up there? He gets a little bit nervous. But notably, I will give him credit. He is trying to play off the idea that he's not scared. He says, or no, he asks, is there something up there? And he goes to investigate. So he's not truly scared. But it is interesting, right? This guy who's supposedly such a stickler for the rules, it's just the rules. 2 more people got to be there for exorcism indoors. He's going to go on to break some rules very, very shortly. But with it being the case, we see that they creak the door open. They go up in there, and they hear a voice. That's a good boy. Hey, where'd you come from anyway? Really? You poor thing. And we see all these, once again, I'm assuming these are, part of me wants to say maybe these are insects, but I'm assuming these are also just very, very low grade 4 curses. They're crawling up, and they're all showing up here. And you'll even note that there seems to be some sort of drool dripping from here, or like some sort of liquid that's like pooling on the ground around this seemingly frog-like beast. At least the hands look very froggy. Or no, the hands look like human hands, but they're also webbed as if they were amphibious. And there's this liquid seemingly falling on down here. But notably, this creature is being communicated to in a voice that they can hear and understand. And we see Osuki. He's here being licked by one of the cursed spirits. And he's notably directly communicating with it. Now, we did definitely, and we'll get more lore in a second, but we did definitely get the idea that the Kalions were worshipped. But we didn't know I don't think we knew that they were spoken to directly, right? I compared the worship of the Kalions in very similar to many different Earth cultures where certain animals and beasts and ideas were directly revered. But like, despite people claiming that you could speak to these sacred beasts or sacred objects like the moon or the sun, we never actually had a direct means of communication with those, at least as far as I know. It was usually just all speculation. And the same case is here, but it seems the Samurians, probably through the nature of the Royaloka and the Third Eye, are actually able to directly understand cursed spirits. And while obviously this is a horrifying image to us, right? In fact, you can tell this creature almost looks like he's about to directly munch on Osuki. What's actually happening, or at least what I presume is actually happening, they uplick on it and immediately annihilate it, so we don't know. Maybe it was just trying to get his guard down so I can nibble on him and lie to him. Very particularly, it's licking him. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever had a pet before, but animals show affection through licking. It's one of their ways that they clean themselves, and also a way that they, like, imbue, like, not necessarily imbue protection, but, like, typically, an animal will lick you when it trusts you. It'll bite you when it doesn't trust you, but it'll lick you. I had dogs, and they would lick my hands all the time. Did I let dogs lick my face? No, that's literally just how I was raised. We didn't let dogs on furniture or anything like that either. That's just part of how I grew up. And I plan to do the same thing whenever I get animals again if I do. But very particularly, the reason that liquid is falling down is because Osuki's getting licked. He's essentially revering this thing because it's a Kalion to him. And thusly, the Kalion or the cursed spirit is also directly interacting with him. Once again, though, it's really hard to tell what would have happened if the nameless guy and other nameless guy didn't show up, though. Like, was it ever going to flip and tweak on him? I don't know. It's really hard to tell. And once again, with the scale of this curse, I'm not sure if it's meant to be like a grade 3 or a grade 2. I doubt it's a grade 1 or a special grade, but still, it's clearly a massive, or relatively massive curse. But it's not trying to immediately attack Osuki or devour him. It's licking him and communicating with him. So, like, I don't know. Was it playing a long game? Was it not? We don't know. That's the thing. And I don't necessarily blame the guy for clearly instantaneously upping Blick because he sees what looks like a Sumerian about to be consumed by a cursed spirit. And that's the whole idea of cultural differences I mentioned at the end of last chapter. And we see, as this occurs, naturally, there's a horror occurring in Shibuya, or not Shibuya, in Shinjuku, or the Inhuman Mchio, because naturally, if they think that Kalions are cursed spirits, and it's time for the Great Purification Ritual, and the Great Purification Ritual isn't a thing that even looks remotely ritual-esque, it's going in there and one by one, banging them down, yeah, it's gonna look really, really bad to the group of people who would worship things that look very similar to cursed spirits and seemingly sound like cursed spirits too. Once again, that idea of communication is what makes the Lemurians or Remelians distinctly alien in comparison to us. We could never understand a cow. I'm thinking of like sacred animals. We can never understand a cow or an elephant or a rhino. Massive, powerful beasts that are very distinctly inhuman, but still have been revered throughout history for many times, reasons, and purposes, and for different beliefs. But we could never understand them. But even cursed spirits, they're close enough to Kalions that they can be understood. And we see that both Usami and Mino are on the way to try and make it happen as quick as possible, or at least make it stop as quick as possible. As Mino says, Kalions are cursed spirits? And Usami points out the difference between Kalions and cursed spirits. Something that is interesting depending on how you interpret the cursed spirits we saw in the original narrative. As Usami clarifies, no, Kalions have physical forms, but Kalions are about as close to a cursed spirit as a creature can get, which means cursed spirits are probably spirits that are as similar to Kalions as possible. I know they're called cursed spirits, but like cursed spirits that are spirits, it just sounds weird. But which means cursed spirits are probably spirits that are as similar to Kalions as possible. We need to contact the team who's doing the Great Purification Ritual ASAP. Let's head to Tokyo. So, obviously, they can sense the conflict that's happening. And we see that Jabaloma admittedly gets it. Notably, he's not even mad. And now that he knows about cursed spirits, neither him nor Cross are actually angry with humans. They just know, oh, this is going to lead to conflict. As Jabaloma says, we'll go with you. Let's hurry. And we see that the Now-Nox's speed and potency as a means of travel is being shown off once again, as Cross says, it'd be faster to go back to the Now-Nox and descend from there. So, this is an interesting place for conflict to get down devious and dirty. Though I do definitely wonder, we still don't know enough about Kalions, because I wonder why. I mean, obviously, I get why, though, because of the biological reaction, right? That's another big difference, right? Not only the fact that they can communicate with the Kalions, but, like, for example, as revered as animals are, you may have a strong emotional reaction if one perishes, but, like, your biology won't spontaneously, like, you won't almost get brain damage, right? But, as we'll see Osuki later on in this chapter, and we saw with Elder Boro in last chapter, the second they saw a cursed spirit dying, their eyes started dripping, which only happens around Kalions. Their body's really reacting to the death of a cursed spirit as if it were a Kalion. So I don't blame them for assuming that it was a Kalion. But I wonder in their heads, how did they rationalize a Kalion appearing on an entirely different planet? Right? Like that's my only question. Like what do you like? How did your brain even, how the synapses fire in order to get to that point? That's the one thing that's interesting to me. And I wonder if we're gonna get an explanation for it. We'll see. As we see, we cut back to the group, and I believe it's Yuka explaining. Changing the talismans is simple enough, but you gotta be careful of the cursed objects that are placed there to ward off cursed spirits. As time passes, the quality of a cursed object changes, and sometimes the ward becomes a beacon, right? And we know this essentially happened to Sukuda's fingers. We also know that Sukuda's fingers were kind of in a weird position. It's implied that Kenjaku just had them over the 1,000-year period, and then let them go intermittently to feed certain clans. Like, he probably let a couple slip while he was the head of the Kamo clan, very particularly because he wanted them to be discoverable. We know the one that Yuji was imbued with was one that Yuji was imbued with from birth. Jogo had 10 of them, just 10 separate fingers all at once. Gojo had what? Like, I don't think the fingers of Sukuna were ever lost. I think Kenjaku just distributed them over the years, but he had them. And we know that the Sukuna fingers, one of the most powerful cursed objects we've seen, definitely ended up acting as attractors, and cursed spirits would even consume them to get massive amps because of the cursed energy stored inside them. So, it is a bit intriguing to see that being the case. And the idea that these wards could become beacons. So I do wonder if the Sukuna fingers were ever originally used as wards, or at least attempted to be, and then it just became beacons for cursed spirits. And naturally, Maru's like, oh, I get it. And telling the difference is part of a Jujutsu sorcerer's job, huh? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like that's something that's easy to do. Which is interesting why you apologize so quickly. It's almost like they looked at him funny. I mean, Tsurugi has a certain look at him, but still, it doesn't seem to be like a negative one. So I don't get why Maru apologizes here. And they both, the siblings do immediately point out, he's really enjoying this. As Maru says, the fact that protecting people is just part of your job and your everyday life, instead of being some duty or destiny you were born with, well, I just think that's really cool. And that is interesting, right? Ultimately, Maru is directly kind of telling us that Remelians, by the nature of their existence, have a lot less freedom. Obviously, the biggest point of freedom was their creation of the Now-Nox and coming to Earth in the first place. But just in general, they don't seem to have the same levels of freedom that sorcerers do. As we get an explanation when Tsurugi asks, oh, so being a warrior isn't just a job for Rumelians? And Maru explains, oh, not exactly. The village Kalion decides at birth whether you're a warrior or not. Oh, speaking of warriors or not, I'm dumb, stupid. I completely forgot Windows was Ijichi. Like, essentially, any of the sorcerers would just cast barriers. Mino is a window. I completely forgot what windows were. I was like, I'm confident that doesn't exist in JJK. I was just stupid and wrong. Last chapter, there's that. Windows are windows. We know windows. We've seen windows. The window was the reason that Suguna got hit with the 200% hollow purple round star. Like, I don't know why I completely forgot about windows. But that's interesting, right? Because essentially, if Rumelian women are windows, they can wield Curse energy. Like, they're still, for all intents and purposes, basically sorcerers. They're just like non-curse technique having sorcerers. So it's very interesting that they're quote unquote not allowed to do that, but they still can clearly wield Warrior Loco or cursed energy. So I do wonder why. It's probably just, once again, a cultural thing, a limitation put upon you from birth. As Maru explains, not exactly. The village Kalion decides at birth whether you're a warrior or not, which is interesting. Once again, a lot more predetermination from the Kalion. The Kalion's very, very important. And we see, you could even say, wait, they can tell whether someone's a sorcerer or not right after they're born? And yeah, that's pretty crazy. Obviously, everyone can wield cursed energy, but becoming a sorcerer does seem to be slightly different even on Earth. But we find out from Maru, oh, not all Kalions can do it. That Kalion is a special one that Rumelians have been worshipping for 2,000 years. And naturally, both Tsurugi and Yuka are like, whoa, 2,000 years? Oh, right, they're immortal. And that is interesting, right? I don't think there's anything... like, nothing we know, and to be fair, 2,000 years isn't actually, I'm not going to say 2,000 years isn't actually too long. In the grand scheme of the universe's life, it's not that long. But we don't actually know of anything immortal in our world. Like, not truly immortal. The immortal jellyfish is only immortal because it just resets its lifespan. That's not really immortal. That's, essentially restarting. It's kind of like giving birth in a way, except the birth is you. Like, you essentially just reset the baby mode. That's not you being immortal, that's you reaching the end of your lifespan and being like, oh no, and then immediately going all the way back, which is very conditional and happens with a very small, very non-complex creature. The only other hypothetical immortal being are like lobsters. Lobsters are technically immortal, they just don't have the energy to molt. Like, it takes too much energy for them to molt. And that's like a biological limit set into them that just takes way too much energy for them to molt after a while, after they get super big. So lobsters aren't even really immortal. And then, like, the universe itself isn't immortal. The universe is forecasted to die just no time soon. Earth is going to die by being consumed by the sun no time soon. The sun going to die just no time soon. Like, that's the thing. Everything has a lifespan. So it is very interesting to see the idea of immortality being brought up in Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. Especially considering even the longest lived characters we know, unless you make some, like, you have to generously interpret the Druve statement, or not even generously. You have to do what I do. I assume Kenjaku is older than the Heian era because of Druve being a guy, right? And Druve is from an era that predates even the Heian era, but he was part of the Culling Games. So, like, how did he make an agreement with Kenjaku to be part of the Culling Games? Unless Kenjaku was alive at that point to make that agreement with him. But people point out, it is stated in the official text as well that, like, that's his second incarnation. And when I hear second incarnation, I'm thinking, oh, like, his second life. But a lot of people see second incarnation, like, his first incarnation would be his first incarnation into a new body. And so he did it again. So, like, maybe there was just a Druve in the Heian era that was reliving the good days, and then he met Kenjaku who was around from the Heian era. I don't know. I think Kenjaku's really old. But even Kenjaku wouldn't be 2,000 years old. Even with that generous interpretation, unless you think he predates Druve even further than that, he wouldn't be alive at all. Kenjaku was only like 1,000 years plus literally confirmed, and then he could be like, I think it's like 1,400 years plus. But even then, Kenjaku's immortality is very conditional, right? Like, it's the body hopping thing, which is his cursed technique. So if he ever couldn't do that, then he was not truly immortal. So it is interesting. And naturally, we see this extra context being given to the Kalion, a seemingly truly immortal being, as Maru explains. Plus, we get our middle names from the Kalion too. He seems very proud of it. And both Tsurugi and Yuka go, wow. And then immediately say, your full name is too long to even remember. But that's very interesting, right? Not only do they have a specific Kalion that determines their nature, whether or not they are a warrior or not, presumably for exclusively male Rumelians, but on top of that, it gives them names, which once again confirms that Kalions can communicate. So they're like worshipped as deities, but they're also deities that can communicate. Which, at least for our deities, we haven't really been able to do that. So it's very, very interesting. And I do wonder, is that Kalion on the ship? Is that on? Did they leave that one behind? I highly, like, that one has to be there with them, right? Because if they've been worshipping it for 2,000 years, I highly doubt they left it behind. So, like, are we actually going to see a real Kalion that's not just, like, in flashback form in terms of, like, an example? Because that has to, and that may be the Kalion that we saw a few chapters back during the flashback anyway. But, like, I want to see it in person. Like, where is it on the Now? Because it has to be here, right? There's no way they left such an important part of their culture behind. If they've been worshipping that thing for 2,000 years and it's just been chilling, it had to come with them, right? There's no way it's just left back on Samoria. I don't know. And how big is it? How strong is it? Like, I genuinely do want to know. It has to be a special grade, right? But then again, I don't know, considering all Kalion are immortal and with physical form. So I don't know. It's interesting learning more and more about their culture and getting more and more information on it. Because this raises more questions. Like, how? Why? How do they communicate? It seems to be a mental thing, though. Considering Osuki is speaking, but we don't hear the cursed spirit ever speak back. It leaves that to him, though it's clearly responding. Like, in between these two panels is clear response by the cursed spirit as it licks at him. So, like, I'm assuming it's like a mental thing, which is unique, and maybe it's facilitated by the third eye. But with that being the case, we cut right back to the Inhuman Mchio, and we see a crash, and we see that Mino, Usami, Jabaloma, and Cross have all arrived. And naturally, he hears the crash and the clash, and is like, oh no, are we too late? Please, let me handle it. And he takes off his glove and gets ready to use cursed speech, and runs off. And we see that Cross is very worried, and notably, he's got the sticky on him. And by the sticky on him, I literally do mean, like, the sticky. He has a sword on him. Oh, do you not hold anymore? I have drawn you a lot. It makes sense. Yeah, you don't hold anymore. But he's strapped up, let's say. And notably, I don't think we've ever seen him wield this weapon before, but he has it. And now I think about it, I also want to go back and check. I don't think we've seen him wield this weapon before. And I'm not even going to say it's an excuse for what happens later on. But we see that he's the sorcerer, the nameless sorcerer, is knocked out of the building, and we see the head of the Kalion, the thing that was giving Osuki a good licking and a good talking, falls out, thuds and rolls. And we see, we do get his name. I'm stupid. So we get his name in this chat. I did not even notice that in live reaction, so we're going to delete my complaint. I mean, it's still a last second thing, but still, we have his name, and we've seen his character before, so it is important. But he says, Yakimaru here. We were obstructed by Samorian during the Great Purification Ritual. All teams assemble immediately. And now, Yakimaru, it depends if Mahito's playing a role. Because, like, Mahito is clearly playing a role. There's an interpretation of Mahito's appearance, or I'll go into in a bit, that I think, hopefully, my interpretation of being right rather than the common interpretation. Or maybe it was right, maybe it was wrong. As we see Yakimaru essentially blame the Samorian, or blame Osuki for stopping the ritual, or getting in the way of it, and now he wants all teams together so he can beat them up. That's essentially what he's doing here. And we see that, ultimately, it is not just Osuki. Both Osuki's friends and a lot of other Samorians, presumably a good chunk of warriors, or at least Rumelian men, are all here. And notably, you can see their third eyes are all crying. They all at least bear the same two tears that Elder Poro was shown to have before, and on top of that, the ones that Dabura or Dura was shown to have on his deathbed. And we see that now that it looks like he's about to get jumped to oblivion and beyond, he essentially blames Osuki for conflict of any kind, and says, your side made a move first, and immediately ups Blake on that. Which, I don't want to call him stupid, but he's stupid, right? Like let's level real quick. You're one man with one Blake, and know barely anything about this group of super powerful, cursed energy wielding individuals. Do you think you were gonna Blake them all down? You thought you were gonna Blake them all down, and your whole team was gonna arrive in time to save you? Luckily enough, before he's actually able to complete what he is, upping stick and launching stick, wait. And it's this cursed speech. And notably, Yakamoto recognizes the cursed speech. He says, that's Usami's cursed speech. And Usami says, everyone calm down, the ritual is suspended. And naturally, Yakimaru, who's been itching for a reason this entire time, right? That was pointed out back in the chapter. I literally looked up Yakimaru to see if I've heard his name before, Yakumaru. I looked his name before in chapter, and it is good that it is in chapter 10, so it was like 2 chapters ago. How did I forget that quickly? But 2 chapters ago, he was already looking for a reason, and we see now he's very mad. They're like, what are you talking about? Why are we stopping the ritual? And Usami explains, they weren't given sufficient explanation about cursed spirits, and we're also deliberately withholding information about Jujutsu. Now that's come back to bite us, leading to this incident. So we're at fault here too. Calm down. Because essentially, what I'm assuming happened here is that Yakumaru wasn't even blown out of the building because of the cursed spirit, right? Presumably, he upblinked on the cursed spirit and probably got. I'm assuming he got the shot off, right? Because you can see the cursed spirit's head roll and follow him out the building, right? It thuds to the ground with him. So what I'm assuming happened. In fact, you even see its arm too. So I'm assuming he managed to defeat the cursed spirit. And considering that's a clean slice, it may have been him and his ally defeat the cursed spirit. But he was here, right? Osuki was here. And he is presumably a warrior as well. So he probably struck him for like being like, dude, what the heck? And he punched. That's why he makes the excuse of your side made the first move. He doesn't take too much damage from it though. Admittedly, he does eat whatever Osuki did to him. Because what? He has a slight bit of blood on him. And that may not even be his own blood. But we see that Yakumaru, he's looking for a reason, right? He's like, what reason could they have to interfere with the purification ritual? And Usami drops it, and it's like, cursed spirits and Kalions are very close to being the very same thing. Oh, and this is the thing I want to mention earlier that I kind of glazed over and forgot. Cursed spirits being intangible. Oh, actually, no, I'll get to it in a second. This is why I held it off. Naturally, Yakumaru hears that and is like, so he thought it was submitted. Oh. Yeah, like, you know, I will admit, Yakumaru's reaction here straight. Because, like, that is, it's like, I don't know, I love to travel, and whenever I have traveled before, I try to do my best to do research on areas before I go. But there are still some times where I do something that's normal to me and not normal to somebody else, or people from that area, and they're always looking at me like, I'm like, oh, didn't mean to do that. Because sometimes it is bad, because things are instinctual. It was instinctual for him to destroy a cursed spirit, but now knowing that it's a Kalion to them, he's like, oh, he just thought I shot one of their sacred beasts. Oh, that's not good. And we see that Cross is trying to reason with Osugi, who notably didn't take any damage himself, right? I don't think Yakumaru hit him. It is a very yet. And we see that Cross explains, this is a cursed spirit, not a Kalion. And also, Osugi's naturally like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm going to accept that. Look at my eye. That is a Kalion. And naturally, you can see Osugi crying from his third eye. And I do like how the third eye is so separate from them now. Like, while usually the third eye does sync with their lower two eyes, whenever it's experiencing one of the unique biological reactions, it's clearly separated. It's centralized here, and it's automatically crying. And naturally, I don't blame them. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't blame them for assuming these have to be Kalions based on that biological reaction. But we see that we get a confirmation about Kalions. I forget if we had before, but we now have here. As Cross says, if it truly was a Kalion, the strain of those tears will be much greater than what you're feeling right now. Look at the corpse! And very specifically, we see Osugi turn and notice the corpse of the cursed spirit dissipating. And that's why I do wonder, was the cursed spirit playing him? Was it going to eat him? And like, I do want to know, like, would the Romelians, since they're communicating with cursed spirits, since they're able to communicate with cursed spirits, would they be able to rationalize and reason with them? I'm not sure, because we know there are cursed spirits who can speak a human language and can communicate, right? We met Jogo, we met Hanami, we met Dagon, we met Mahito. They were all just didn't like humans, though. Like, they were following their motor-based nature and destroying everything around them. Very specifically humans. So, like, I don't know if they ever could communicate, but it's interesting that a cursed spirit was willing to hold a conversation in the first place, especially seemingly a lower grade one. Unless you think this thing right here was a special grade, like, it was at most like a first grade, but it was willing to communicate with Osugi. Possibly playing it or possibly not. It's really hard to tell. But, with it being the case, obviously the fact that the corpse fades is enough for Osugi to be like, oh, it disappeared. So, obviously, Kalions do have legit physical, they're actual animals. Which does sort of debunk the idea they had that they were like a long-term manifestation of a curse technique. Clearly not. They are like actual naturally occurring, naturally evolved beings on Zamoria. But they have some sort of direct tie to the Romelians. But the cursed spirits are close enough to that they're able to trigger certain biological reactions. As we see Cross explain, cursed spirits are the collected manifestations of Oyuloka that Japanese people unconsciously leak out. They are not Kalions. So that is the difference, right? And that obviously implies that cursed spirits just didn't exist on Zamoria. Kalions existed, but cursed spirits and Kalions, it's a convergent evolution thing, right? You look at a whale, you look at a fish, they're the same thing, right? No, they're just very, very similar. Very specifically, I'm thinking of an example in Free Written, where like we see an orca whale next to a shark. And like, if you look at the two next to each other, big, large sea creature must be the same species. Not at all. One's a mammal, one's a fish. So, it's the same case here for cursed spirits and Kalions. Close enough to be very, very similar. Both sharing many different traits. Both able to release certain biological reactions, but not actually the same thing. And we find out that ultimately it is the fact that the cursed spirits can still communicate with them, even these lower tier ones. As Ozuki says, even still, you could hear their voices too, couldn't you? And naturally, Cross is like, yeah, I could. But please, Osuki, hold it together. And we see Osuki be in shock as Cross says, I'm begging you. Because they're at a point where coexistence is very, very fragile still. They were just making a little bit of progress, but they're taking baby steps forward. But now it's clear they're going to take a massive baby step back if they actively go to war or conflict over this cultural difference. And we see that Jabaloma, the main representative, or at least the main communicator representative, speaks with Usami, the other main communicative representative. And Jabaloma says, I'm terribly sorry. That pencil's about to sneeze. Oh, why did my bones crack? I'm too old. But we see the Jabaloma says, I'm terribly sorry. Don't why sneeze twice. I'm terribly sorry. That took 3 times. And he says, we're at fault for our people leaving the ship and entering Tokyo without permission. And that is true, right? Obviously, for all these Remelians to get here, they did technically have to break the rules, right? They weren't supposed to leave the ship and start intermingling. Heck, we still don't even know why Elder Boro got off the ship and got that far. I'm assuming, once again, that Elder Boro went to a cultural exchange, wanted to step out a little bit, ended up following his sense, possibly following the voices, right? Like, we don't know what the range is on a cursed spirit's voices or a Kalion's voice. So maybe Elder Boro, like, heard the Kalion's cries. We don't know how close they were to Tokyo when they were doing the cultural exchange. But maybe Elder Boro came down for the cultural exchange, went out, just take a break from it all, heard the voices, went over there, saw the purification ritual beginning, saw a cursed spirit die, I was like, and then reported back. But still, they weren't really supposed to do that. They were overstepping their bounds, as it were. Though, of course, I don't blame them for wanting to overstep their bounds, because they've been stuck on a ship for who knows how long. They want to experience and integrate better. So I don't blame Elder Boro for possibly disexploring for that reason alone. But naturally, this did lead to this conflict, and Jabaloma was apologizing for it. But Usami apologized right back and says, this all started because we were being overly cautious. We should have been more upfront with you. Please accept our deepest apologies. Right? Ultimately, these two who are so focused on the idea of coexistence and working together, like, let's just apologize and get it over with. They're essentially trying to go back to a low simmer, right? Because obviously the pot is boiling. I don't know if y'all ever cooked with oil before, but right now all it's going to take is 1 drop of water for everything to go crazy. But unfortunately, there are 2 drops that hit this chapter. As we see Osugi being like, why the heck is he apologizing? And obviously he's talking about Jabaloma. He's like, why are you apologizing to these humans for like essentially caging us up like animals and then being mad that they didn't explain why we were caged up like animals. Like, I get why Osuki in particular would be still very, very annoyed. They just weren't given the whole story, and now supposedly it's their fault. Especially, they were believing that they were seeing their own, like, sacred creatures die again, which was the whole conflict that put them in the scenario that they were on Samuria to the point where they had to escape. If you remember, the main issue that they were having was the idea that the cultural differences between them and the rest of the tribes in Samuria had them worshipping Kalions, but the Kalions attacked literally everybody else. The Remelians are special, biologically, in a way that other species aren't. So essentially, they're apologizing for existing, which obviously he doesn't really like, and I don't blame him for that. But, of course, we see that the strike that I'm assuming Osugi landed on Yakumaru is starting to throb and hurt. And we see that ultimately Yakumaru doesn't believe that they are the ones being caged. He doesn't believe the humans are the ones caging the Remelians. In fact, he believes it's vice versa, as he thinks, do we really have to bend over backwards to take fault here, to grovel to the refugees? And it's once again this idea of an innate human superiority. And then if you'll remember, in this very, very long review, all the way back at the beginning, I asked you a question. What makes us any different from animals? Most people would probably say we are still animals. We're just smarter. That's kind of what I believe. But there are many people who say, well, we are literally different. We are the apex of the food chain, if there ever were a food chain. We are the smartest creatures on the planet. We're one of the few creatures that can identify ourselves as ourselves. We have dominion over everything. We have technology, understanding, all that. But at its core, we're still just animals. But for those who think we aren't, that leads to the idea of a supremacy over animals. But then that supremacy evolves. Think about every conflict ever. Conflict between humans in particular. Conflicts that rage on even to this day. What is the reasoning behind them? In the modern day, where we have more, especially in many different nations, where we have more than enough food and resources and space to make it so that every single one of the 8 billion humans on the planet could live well and thrive well and eat well and just survive and do better, what reason is there for conflict? What reason is there for a consistent state of violence that the world ever consistently exists in? Why is it like that? Because I think it's because at our core, humans are still wild animals. And innately a bit malicious. Because why does Yakimaru view it this way? The idea that they're groveling over a cultural difference that he ultimately was a part of. If anything, this should just be a point of learning. But he takes this hit as an insult. He looks down on the Romelians, the refugees. Why do we bend over backwards like falling to grovel to the refugees? When they're just apologizing for an incident that was about to occur that could lead to conflict. Yakimaru doesn't see it that way. It's a matter of interpretation. And I think that's what goes down to a lot of the conflicts of today. A matter of interpretation, and very specifically in dehumanization of many different groups and many different types of people. At the end of the day, we're all humans. There should be no reason that humans should harm other humans. But we do. We have. We will. And there are circumstances where even people like me who do not believe in violence wholeheartedly can understand in ways that violence would come out of me. But in this case, this is clearly the innate and most base hunger for just any conflict of some kind. It's the idea that humans will always find a reason. In certain cases, it is a reason such as a difference in physical appearance. You look different from me. I am better than you, and thusly I shall subjugate you. In other cases, it is you have land that I want. You are living on it. I want that land. I will subjugate and slaughter your people. In other cases, it's even less, where people will look the same, live on the same land, but someone will have something else or something minor. Oh, your nose looks different than mine. Your eyes are slightly off kilter. Something is wrong with you. I am better. I will attack you without regard. And it's clear the same case is here. The situation was being de-escalated. Everything was calming down. But now that they're in this position, they're watching. They're standing opposed from each other. Yakimaru's injury from before is beginning to throb and throb and throb. And we see that Jabaloma and Usami, both representatives who seek peace, understand the tension. And seriously go with the idea of, we should disperse for now. And Usami says, that's a wise choice. I'll contact you again soon. But we see Cross, whether it be out of habit or something of the sort, reaches for a blade that he's never carried before, but it still is a blade. Note where Cross is looking, though. Down. If anything, he's touching his weapon out of habit. But at the very simple sight of a weapon being touched, we see the throbbing gets too intense, Yakimaru's eyes pulse with veins, and something occurs. But we don't reach that just yet. As Yuka says, alright, so that was the last one. And Maru says, oh, I've been wondering, why not put these things in locations that are a bit easier to get to? And Yuka explains, the key element for barriers, and then Tsurugi continues, is that they have to be in high places, low places, or in special spiritual sites. And Maru admits, jeez, that sounds rough. And Yuka explains, well, we generally don't have enough sorcerers to help. And notably, Tsurugi points out a very interesting idea. Oh, well, we would if the Romelians could help us. And naturally, Maru, seeing an idea to further coexistence, is excited and says, oh, right, that's a great idea. And both are shocked to hear it. And he says, we can totally help Earth too. And both Yuka and Tsurugi smile at that as the sun begins to set. And we see that Maru says, I'll tell everyone when we get back. I'm sure the Romelian warriors are going to be thrilled, considering they're finally going to be allowed to do something to help and protect people, fulfill their purpose that was given to them by their deity. And Tsurugi says, great, I'm looking forward to it. And Yuka says, well, see you later. And very specifically, we see everyone walk down different paths. I do think it's important that Yuka's walking over a bridge, which typically covers something like a river, crossing the river into the afterlife. We see Tsurugi walk down a different path, but a path nonetheless separate from his sister, oddly specific. And we see Maru take another path that seems to be elevated of sorts. A higher being from a higher land returning to that higher land. But they're all going separately. There is a separation between humans and Samurians, and there is even a separation between humans and humans. And we hear two things. Bang! Bang! We turn the page and see Cross with two holes in his body. One seemingly over where his heart would be or his lungs, and another just directly in his lungs. naturally, if this is a declaration of war if I've ever seen it, one of their head representatives has been shot, not once, but twice, after doing what? Touching a sword. Touching a sword. And naturally, Osuki, who definitely has had his complicated feelings about Cross, but still has ultimately come to respect him and understand him, thanks to the development that they went through together, as we seen through the flashback, goes, Cross! And naturally, Usami's like, why would you do that? Like, of course, the worst time, the worst place, the worst instant to do that, as he asks, why the heck did you shoot him? And we see that Yakimaru says, he reached first weapon, he made the first move. And we know Yakimaru is one who's wanted to fight the Sumerians. He's wanted to fight the Remelians. Now, part of me wants to pawn off the blame. The reason I said, I may be right about an interpretation that's different from everyone else's, when Mahito popped up and said, darn, it's not him, huh? A lot of people read that as, oh, that's him talking about Yuji. He thought Yuji was going to show up. Personally, I didn't think so. What I thought that was the idea that Mahito is looking for a point of conflict between the Remelians and the humans. What was about to happen when Mahito appeared was that conflict. If Cross didn't step in and stop Maru, Maru was going to attack and possibly brutalize Tsurugi, which would have led which obviously Tsurugi is very, very important. He's essentially the prince of the Gojo clan in a way, even if he's fundamentally different in many ways. But he's a prince of the Gojo clan. If he was attacked by a Remelian and definitely brutalized by them, that would have been an incentive for war. And we know Mahito is the hatred of humanity made manifest as a curse. So he grows stronger and more powerful when there is a consistent funnel of hatred. So when he says, darn, I guess it's not him, I thought he meant, oh, that's not the trigger for the war. That's not the trigger for the conflict. So I almost want to blame Yakimaru's snapping here and double pumping Cross full of cursed energy lead because of Mahito. The idea that that throbbing is more than just the hit that presumably Osuki landed on him, but also it's Mahito being like, do it. But at the same time, I don't think Gege would push that kind of narrative. I think this is meant to touch into the idea of what Modulo always seems to be about. The core of humans. The core of people. Where, for one reason or another, there's some people who always want conflict. People who benefit from it. People who desire it. People who seek violence. There are many. Think of every single violent event ever, especially the random ones. They just happen. Someone just had the power to do so, and they did. That is what this is. Yakimaru took the excuse of Cross reaching for his weapon. And I must emphasize, Cross wasn't even looking at him. He wasn't like, how do you even draw a sword? Like what? Do you think Cross was gonna, and then blitz you? Like, Cross wasn't going to attack him. If anything, he was stabilizing his sword. But Yakimaru took that as an excuse to shoot him and incite conflict. And naturally, seeing Cross, one of their two saviors that put them in this position in the first place, be shot and possibly be dying. We don't even see what happens to Cross here. The chapter immediately ends after this. He may literally be dying. Remember, there doesn't seem to be any RCT users. As far as we know, Shoko's dead. Yuta's dead. Those are the only two sources we knew. Rika may be around, but even still, we don't know about that. She may just be gone as well, because Yuta's died. So, all external RCT users, Suga's dead too, but like, he wouldn't use RCT. But essentially, all the external RCT users are gone. Cross was shot twice. He may just be dead. And we see that Osuki, in a fury, says, I'm gonna kill you, you fiend! And naturally, Jabaloma, not wanting violence, because of course, this will, down, there's too many people here, presumably all warriors, they're sorcerers, it will lead to conflict. He says, Osuki! He doesn't even say stop, he simply yells his name, being like, please don't do this. But ultimately, a man who I don't think we got the name for says, don't stop us, Jabaloma! And we see that the sorcerers, aligned with Yakimaru, all look for the opportunity to immediately go to it, as they say, well, we must protect ourselves. Like, once again, it's clear that just by human nature, they want to fight. And Mino specifically grabs and is like, everyone just wait! And naturally, Usami's about to shut all this down with her speech, when a certain someone appears. Someone who transcends both the Remelians and the humans. He simply asks, what are you doing? And in the pouring rain comes a singular man. The Diskuntai, the strongest Sumerian, Dabura. And with his very arrival, the chapter ends. So overall, if you could tell, yeah, it's a W chapter. What do you think this was? This chapter's peak. And you may be like, well, if it's so peak, then what's your conflict? What's your complaint? I don't actually have one anymore because I thought we didn't know Yakimaru's name. The one complaint I had was like, we don't even know the guy who started this war, right? Or started the hypothetical war that's about to go on. But we do know his name. He gets it. I just didn't notice it in the live reaction. So that one problem I had is gone. And notably, I think it is important that it is Yakimaru, right? It's not Usami. It's not Bino. It's not any character we really know. It's just this guy who's been bloodthirsty. Because that's how humans are. There are just some people who are bloodthirsty. There are people like me who just don't get violence and don't think violence really even exists in the modern day. There's no reason in our very, like, you know how much, sorry, I'm going to go down a whole thing, but you know how much food is thrown away every single day? And all in multiple countries. But I'm very specifically from I'm from the States. So like I think of how much food is just thrown away every single day. Perfectly good food, by the way. Perfectly good food. Just thrown away. Yet there are people starving. Not all around the world, but once again, here in the States. You know how many houses just sit empty? Like straight empty. And I'm not talking about like houses that have been bought by somebody and then are being like loaned out or someone's like, no, like just empty. Whole full functional houses, small, big, large, in between, just empty. There's a massive homeless problem, quote unquote, that could easily be solved, right? Right? Like that's the thing. There are so many problems that are just manufactured by human greed and conflict and disrespect and disregard for other people's humanity. That's just how it is. And that's why I was talking earlier about Gege taking themes of that text and smacking us over the head with it. Because that's what this is about. The idea of different groups looking for any reason to conflict. In this case, I would say the Rebellions are well within their right to do what they wanted. They've been treated like caged animals, secondary citizens, and insulted and locked away for the idea that they must bow and kowtow to every single thing. I don't blame them for doing what they did. And notably, they didn't even do anything too bad. Yakimaru got hit once over a cultural misunderstanding when they thought they were literally slaying their gods. After they themselves were not given the full story on the cursed spirits until literally the very same day. It is Yakimaru, the human who stands in a quote-unquote superior position, that takes this opportunity to ruthlessly slaughter another sentient being, or at least attempt to, over the idea that he quote-unquote reached for his weapon. And there is even further. Like, I'm dancing because this is for the main channel. Over in the reaction, I got a little bit more for you. So you want to hear some things about your boy more? Over, you can go check out the live reaction. But very particularly over here, I'm going to say but the whole idea of, can I say that? Can I say that? I'm scared. You know what it is. There's a reason why themes on text is so heavy here. A innocent person was attacked ruthlessly and viciously, possibly at the cost of their very life or bodily autonomy, for the possibility of them doing something. Does that sound familiar to you? Oh, they're just dangerous by nature. I feared for my life, so I shot them. Oh, they reached for a weapon. I had to take their life. Oh, they are different from us. Thusly, they are lesser. Thusly, I want to destroy. Like, that is human. That is, unfortunately, like, I forget where the quote even comes from. But humanity's truest form is evil. I don't want to believe that, but darn is it hard not to when you think about all the just worthless conflicts that happen nowadays. But once again, I'm getting a little bit too deep into it. We're in the chapter, right? We are going to, I refuse. Channel almost got boomed already. I refuse to be able to get over something else. But an amazing chapter. Once again, further developing into the conflict. Dabura appearing here, though, once again, the strongest of the current era, and very particularly one who stands above both humans and rebellions. I'm interested to see what his reaction is, right? Will he simply just immediately execute Yakimaru and say, don't do it again? Or will he try to reach some sort of understanding? Dabura himself doesn't want to fight, but it's clear he showed up for a reason. His presence is meant to indicate something. I'm very interested to see what that is. Obviously, the main thing I'm interested in is to see Maru's reaction to Cross getting shot. I wonder if he can feel it, considering he says we'll find your sibling based on the balance all the way back in chapter 1. But also, I want to know what Cross's fate is going to be. I hope Cross doesn't die. He's literally my favorite of the core 4 that we have right now. So I really hope he doesn't die. But overall, this is Gege Kusami, and I wouldn't put it past him. But overall, if you made it all the way to the end of this younger, and I do mean younger, of a video, please do me a favor and leave. He reached for it. Well, no. They reached for their weapon. I won't say he reached for his weapon because that may be reference, but they reached for their weapon. In the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also I do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. And so now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reaction to this very chapter, which is 30 minutes long, along with all the previous live reactions, all future live reactions to this and other series I review, ad-free variations of literally all my videos, early access to all my videos, not just the reviews I do over here and any other style video I do over here, but all the videos for the second channel that got the reaction, which will be linked in the description down below. I drop videos 1 p.m. EST every single Saturday during that time, which vary in range from like 40 minutes to like 2 hours. So if you want just more content and early content, you get a Patreon member. You get those also ad free, just early over here. There are 2 currently up at the time of recording. I plan to make more. I want to have that channel like forever ahead. I want to never have to worry about like recording a video the night before the Saturday video is supposed to go up over there. So you get early access to that content, and also you get your name listed at the end of literally every single video. And if you are a $3 member or higher, you get your name read aloud and not just listed at the end of every single video. On top of that, if you want to come out to any of the streams where we discuss chapters, typically at the end of the week, that would be on Fridays at 8 p.m. EST. Over on That Guy the Controller, we literally talk chapters. Whole last stream was just us going crazy talking about a whole bunch of chapters and stuff like that. So if you want to do live yap sessions with your boy, those are over there, over on the Twitchy. And then if you want to drop 5 beans for a short video or 25 beans for a long video for the one time, the Ko-Fi is in the description down below. But now I would like to thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Gyomi, Buddha Ura, Enzo, Swift Strike, Super Flame Zero, Yuki Ally, Azo2404, Striker Man, Grim, Straw, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, CCC, Ramondo Furen, Dino, Axis XZ, Plant Crone, Pickle, Heath Nelson, Hector Gonzalez, P-Sub, Black Sage, Zapro, Tim Thomas, Alex Kenny, Kaving, Julian Perez, H-Soe, Akolade Bamatunde, Union I, RXN, Nevis97, Sheesh King, Logan Guzman, Karina Hernandez, Window Life, Dead Meme, Karudir, and Reina. Then I'd like to give a thank you to Artline Art Tier patrons: A+A, Kevin Encarnacion, Sean, Midnight Lord 21, Dread Zoen, and Norgazi Adasov. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our Ink Tier members: King RTX and Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06. And I'd like to give a thank you to our Digital Art Tier members: Jay Warrior and AZ Void. And I'd like to give a final thank you to our Colored Art Tier patrons: Walking Munoz and Walking Munoz.